How do we create a better future for everybody? Our technology has advanced by leaps and bounds, but our society faces ever more complex challenges. As Japan leads the world in confronting these issues, we must share the solutions we develop. Our vision is Society 5.0, a smart future to which everybody can contribute. Location, age, gender, or ability. In Society 5.0, diversity is a source of strength. The University of Tokyo, founded in 1877, has contributed to the modernization of Japan through education and research. Since 2017, the Future Society Initiative has supported projects across the university to drive social change and realize Society 5.0. How can we realize this vision of Society 5.0? What issues will we face, and what technology and innovation will be needed? The University of Tokyo's activities are founded on our broad knowledge accumulated across the humanities and sciences over our long history. The Future Society Initiative is an international effort. We grow by aligning university activities with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We hope you will join us as the Future Society Initiative works to create a better, inclusive future that leaves no one behind.
Hello everybody, it's Max with Crypto Talk Now. On a few other deep dives, as you guys know, I have done probably about 2 or 3 videos in regards to DFFT, Data Free Flow with Trust. So this video is going to be an update on some of the recent developments that made news they may not have been aware of. And this time around, it's not just strictly Japan that's in the mix. Why should it matter, and why should you pay attention to it? Well, let's face it, we should all pay attention to it. And how about this for size? Not just because we are Jasmy holders, right? Also because it is an absolute big win for the overall crypto market. And it is something that everybody should pay attention to, because this is the regulatory framework that we are all looking for. When I said that Japan was going to lead the charge, they are leading the charge, and now we have other big players from the European Union paying attention and so on. So let's jump into this update in regards to DFFT and why it's so crucial and why we should pay attention to it. Here we go. All right, so let's start things off with this for the outline. This comes from JD Supra, and it's also from Allen and Overy. Global policymakers make further steps to support data free flow with trust. Global policy makers, not just Japan, right? So I want to jump down to this, and it states the international community are continuing to take further steps towards data free flow with trust. We know this, building on recent developments such as the draft of the EU/US data privacy framework. Again, like I mentioned, it's not just, for instance, Japan that's doing it. Now we're starting to get some of these other things, right? The privacy framework. An expansion of global cross-border privacy rules system beyond the APEC region. Now, I'm going to jump down further into some of this. And like it says, all these things being mentioned plays, of course, a big role in stabilizing the international system for flows of personal data, and can also create progress towards convergence and interoperability between data, different data, I should say, protection and privacy regimes, whilst recognizing the need to maintain high standards and trust. Again, institutional money. If institutional money is going to come into this, and that's what we really want as far as generational wealth, They're not going to come in if there's not a set standard and if there's not that type of trust there. It has to be there, right? And, you know, if you're a newcomer to our channel and so on, the reason why I put so much emphasis on this is because, for one, we all want to get that generational wealth, right? The way I look at it is crypto is a marathon. It's one of the biggest, longest races. It shouldn't be a get-rich-quick scheme. As people are going to see some of the recent prices, for instance, like with Jasmy and some of the other cryptos out there, they're seeing that, man, the price of this has tanked. We touched 0.003839, something like that, the other day. And some people you've seen have panicked. They sold. I'm out of this thing. I'm selling for a loss. I'm done, right? For me, I'm not done. I recognize that as a blessing. I recognize that as opportunity. And why should we pay attention to some of these things? Well, for the same reason that we pay attention to whale activity. And as we know, and we have confirmed this, whether you watch the live show or whether you watch some of these recorded videos, what's going on with whale activity? They are buying up this, right? In vast amounts. That's worth paying attention to. Big time. All right, so G7 declaration and proposed, listen to this, guys, can't make it up, institutional arrangement for partnership. Institutional arrangement? Maybe some of the big institutional players want to have some evidence to support that you have great use case examples or business practices or policy put into motion, right? Well, let's jump into some of this. And here it is. New plans, like it says right here. New plans to deliver on the goal of operationalizing data free flow with trust. They are going to endorse the establishment of the what? Drum roll, please. Institutional arrangement for partnership, IAP, to bring governments and stakeholders together to operationalize DFFT. Ooh, why did Max put so much focus on DFFT? Oh, it's because he was just making a cool video. No, because at the end of the day, it's not just about getting fluff of a news update. It's understanding the nitty-gritty of what is going on in the background. For all of us, even if you're a person that's not even into Jasmy, this is a big deal. There's reasons why I've stated that Japan will lead the charge when it comes to that regulatory framework where we get the clarity. It is the pathway forward. Just like a Ripple win for XRP is a win for crypto. Let's pay attention to this. Listen to this. The declaration includes an annex covering the G7 vision for operationalizing DFFT and its priorities. What are some of those priorities? Well, here's some of that detail. To develop of compatible policies, tools, and practices for enabling data flows in full compliance with existing regulatory requirements regarding data. So we talked about this whole concept of like, man, Tara Kono, you know, he had a few exclusive interviews from, you know, even in, what was it, in Tokyo, Japan. The lady even spoke in English, which was cool. And he had an exclusive with her. And if you saw, the, you know, one of the recent last deep dives, we showed you guys that at the beginning of, you know, of the video, like an intro format. And he talks about some of these things. He wants things to start off small. But now, with all the momentum they're getting, now you see other big players, right? So let's get into some of the big players. And I want to go ahead and get into that in just a moment. But I want to show you this. And this comes from this PDF, if you will, in regards to, you know, the G7 Digital Tech Track Annex. For the vision of operationalizing DFFT and its priorities. So again, like, what are some of these priorities, Max? Well, let's jump into this. So I already told you about some of the things outlined on where it says number 2. But what about this call for the IAP to pay particular attention to the following areas identified by the G7 based on the 2021 roadmap of cooperation on DFFT endorsed by G7 leaders and the 2022 action plan for promoting DFFT? Well, 3 key things: data localization, regulatory cooperation, and trusted government access to data. Now, I'm not going to get into the part about data localization. You can look more into it yourself, but I will highlight what is mentioned here for regulatory cooperation. Why not? So when we talk about Japan leading the charge, we do need to have other countries that are going to have a cooperative effort to join them into the mix. Do we not? Absolutely. Having other countries who want to be on board is the pathway forward for the framework, and then also to get it implemented, and then obviously get the big institutional money coming in. And we understand that, there's some bad news that recently happened. The SEC, Gary the Gopher Gensler, going after 61 or more different cryptos. Heck, I'm invested in a few of those. I even saw Terra Luna Classic part of that, right? I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. Filecoin previously, now Luna Classic, some other ones, right? So people feel as though it's doom and gloom, and they let their emotions take over and they're out. Again, this is a race. It's a marathon. It's not a quick race. It's not a sprint, that's for sure. So the regulatory cooperation, what kind of countries or what kind of areas are we going to have join up in this cooperative effort? Well, it says differences in domestic approaches can impact cross-border data flows, creating uncertainty, including legal uncertainty. For governments, businesses, and individuals, we should promote work in identifying commonalities, in regulatory approaches to cross-border data transfers and data protection requirements, as well as facilitate cooperation on privacy-enhancing technologies. Right, we should. How's that going to get done? Well, we'll get more into that. How about this? Trusted government access to data. Japan, it's a different situation. They obviously trust their government. Why do they trust their government compared to our government? Well, with our government here in the United States, I understand there's a lot of international watchers, and thank you for that. But here, our government, it's like totally different type of situation. Are we really going to trust our government with a lot of these things? No. And that's why, for instance, certain states, Florida recently decided to do a complete ban of CBDCs, right? Not supposed to happen there. But it says the IEP should seek to further develop shared understanding and appropriate risk-based approaches for preventing any government access to personal data that is inconsistent with democratic values and the rule of law. Think about what that mentions, democratic values. So we understand in Japan, especially when it comes to Jasmy, they already respect the whole concept of personal data lockers and, data democratization. You should have a say, or you as in Japanese people, should have a say on where your data goes. And if anything, you should get paid for that. It should be monetized. We don't have that here in the United States, at least yet. Right? So it says it's inconsistent with democratic values and the rule of law and is constrained, unreasonable, arbitrary, or disproportionate. Right? So some people who are, let's face it, the Bitcoin maxis, BC maxis, they're going to say, this all further solidifies the concept that you should just become a person that just invests only in Bitcoin. The SEC is never going to go after BTC because they don't consider it security, but basically they consider everything else a security. Now, there's some big things coming up, and this isn't a Ripple video, obviously, but we should pay attention to what's going to happen on June 13th. We get a Ripple win, like we said before. It's a win for all crypto, whether you're into Ripple as XRP or not. But at the same time, we should pay attention to DFFT just as much as we should pay attention to the Ripple case, in my opinion. All right? So, some people say, well, what does this have all to do with Jasmy? It's the location. It is the of where this is basically headquartered at, right? Tokyo, Japan, and so on. We understand that Japan, like I mentioned, is leading the charge. So this last point, in the process of developing the IEP, they consider the attributes of the OECD and its existing work in areas of data governance, privacy, data free flow with trust, and digital economy make it well suited to advance this international effort. And that's the key thing, advancing this effort, because we need that framework. This framework is laying down the foundation. So we already got the ball rolling with, for instance, Taro Kono, and that's big. But the cool thing is this, while he mentioned that we'll see what happens by the end of the year, oh boy, Momentum has already kicked in. Were you aware of that? Well, let's jump into a little bit of more of what we have. So let's introduce this lady. She is referred to as Margaret Vestager, if I'm pronouncing that right. She is the European Commissioner for Competition. Here's some of her background, right? So basically from 2019 to present, she's the Executive Vice President for a Europe Fit for the Digital Age and Competition, European Commission, 2014-2019. She definitely is a big wig, right? She knows a thing or two because she's seen a thing or two, right? Not to quote farmers, but why not? She's also a Danish politician, currently serving as Executive Vice President of the European Commission for Europe Fit for the Digital Age. Digital Age. Wouldn't that have something to do with Web3? Yeah, you better believe it. So I'm going to go ahead and play this particular clip for you guys. We'll jump back to a little bit more of what we have for this outline, but I'm telling you, you're going to want to continue to watch to the end. It's all going to make sense. And man, oh man, I am that much more bullish, not only on Jasmy and so on, but where we're going to be going here soon. Japan is literally leading the charge. And why put so much emphasis on Jasmy? Because, like I mentioned before in the past, yes, we're long-term holders when it comes to a lot of these things. HBAR, XRP, XLM, XDC, Casper, LCX, you name it. But when I state that Jasmy could get us to the promised land first, yeah, you better believe it. Let's jump into this video, and then we'll be right back. Here we go.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the work done, making this a top priority of the Japanese presidency. We very much agree with you that there is currently a gap in international governance, where there is no forum where democracies like-minded as we are can efficiently cooperate with stakeholders to enable data to move cross-border with protection, and in doing that also fight against digital authoritarianism, because it is a real thing out there. So we very much support this initiative for an institutional arrangement partnership. Obviously, it's important not to duplicate what other organizations are doing, in particular trade issues being negotiated in the WTO. And I think in the scope defined in the declaration, a lot of care has been taken to add value. I think this is quite obvious what can be achieved. And in doing that, I also see that this is a very welcome vehicle for making the principles that underpins the Declaration of the Future of the Internet a real thing, something that happens in real life. I think also in that respect, this partnership will prove very fruitful. On that note, allow me to digress for a second to take this opportunity to invite or encourage our invited partners who have not yet signed up for the Declaration of the Future of the Internet to consider doing so as one of the outcomes of this meeting. The value that it brings in this room, I think, is very important, and the weight will only be increased if very important countries like India and Indonesia will join and support it. I think it would be a very, very strong signal for everyone here present and everyone looking at us. Coming back to the partnership, we believe that the scope of the initiative should be broad to extend to such issues as the protection of non-personal data, fight against malicious state behavior and disinformation, protecting of human rights online. And I think what has been discussed here is also showing that we have heard the call from multinational businesses to make this ambitious. I found it very encouraging to have the letter and the words from this part of the business community to urge us to be ambitious. I think that also shows the need for it. And since we have agreed on the OECD guidelines on government access to data, I also find it very promising that the partnership could be a facilitator for this. So we are very much in favor of exploring concrete solutions, both technological and legal, to ensure trust in the digital sector. And here, of course, the partnership should in particular work on the increasing recourse to model contractual clauses that we, as ministers, recognize as common practices to promote trust in our declaration last year. So this year, I think it's very promising that we can agree on the principle for such a way of organizing ourselves, provide general guidance on the possible issues that should be worked upon, and mandate the G7 Working Group on Tech and Digital Issues to come back with concrete proposals, definition of scope, decision-making processes, criteria for selecting members, budgets, organization of the work of the Secretariat, and in that, of course, also looking very much forward to hearing the OECD contribution to the discussion that we have right now. And obviously, we will contribute actively and in the best possible way to make this a real thing, and being very grateful on your leadership on this. Thank you very much.
So did you see what's going on in there? Hopefully you did, because that is big. You're now starting to see, like she was basically mentioning, you know, there isn't a public forum in regards to at the scale of, you know, some of these bigger players where they can come together, like-minded individuals, and, you know, suss it out, as the saying goes, in regards to, hey, here's the regulatory framework, the foundation of that framework. And you know what? This is big. She even talks about Japan, right? But she represents the interest of the European Union, right? And that is huge in itself. So there's this pathway forward now. You know, we literally see the writing on the wall. At least I do. You know, it's one thing to, I guess you could say, some people say I get people hyped up. I'm not trying to get people hyped up. I'm just trying to provide education. If you want to get hyped up, hey, that's great, right? Nothing wrong with that. But I guess I'm hyping myself up, because the way I look at it is the writing is literally on the wall. It's one thing to go from one stage of, man, you know, regulatory framework, Japan is going to lead the charge, and to hear, you know, Taro Kono talk about, well, you know, we're going to have to wait until see how it goes on later this year. Forget later this year. You've heard talks about, you know, whether it's from Denell Dixon of Stellar, right? Some of these other players, they want to get the thing in motion now, right? Brian Armstrong from Coinbase, they want to get the thing in motion now. The BlackRocks of the world, they want to get the thing in motion now. So are we seeing things that are happening? Is there bigger players, you know, who are working behind the scenes to basically tank the overall crypto market? So, you know, the likes of like Wall Street or Gary Gensler's, you know, special interest groups can have one last chance, basically speaking, to buy this stuff at liquidated prices. Could very well be. I'm not forced to tell. I'm not saying that that's exactly what's going on, but it does make you wonder. It big time makes you wonder, because it's like, you know what? There could be these things going on. And I also saw a recent report, you know, in regards to Gary Gensler, in which he purchased a bunch of Bitcoin, right? And I you know, it was a rumor. I want to get some things that are more solid, some actual sources before I report on that. But man, all these things are going on in the background. So it's like, is it by design? I don't know, but there's enough evidence to say that it very well could be. Now, I don't want to turn this into like a crazy off-kilter type of thing. Let's get back to some of this topic about the FFT, all right? Especially when it comes to, you know, why it should matter for us who hold Jasmy. So let's jump into this, and I'll expand the window on this. So here's another one, somewhat recent. On this one, I'm not going to play the whole video, right? I'm going to play, because it's 58 minutes. But what's really cool here is, like it shows, international cooperation on digital trust. So you saw this lady from earlier, right? Who was, what was her name? Margaret Vestager, if I pronounced that right. Now you're starting to see other bigger players, right? You're starting to see, for instance, like this guy in the middle, bottom middle from Japan. And, there's a guy, of course, hosting this and so on. I'll play this for you. But the main key takeaways, some of the things they're going to be mentioning. And so here's the event overview. I'm not going to, again, play the whole video. I'm going to play roughly about 15 minutes for you guys and so on, because that's the good parts. I will state this. The guy who's from Japan, you got to keep in mind, like, the language is not perfect, so you're going to really have to kind of strain to make out what he's saying. But this event overview, if anything, I think on him I'll play. I'll have some subtitles for you guys. But check this out. So it says a discussion previewing the 2023 G7 summit and the next steps on data free flow with trust. As we know, back in 2019, at the time, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, rest in peace, right, proposed a new model for how nations and companies share data across borders. The data free flow with trust (DFFT) proposal took center stage at the upcoming G7 summit in Hiroshima. It already happened. This conversation will address the key questions on the way forward for DFFT. How do governments determine trust? Right? At the end of the day, institutions want to see that determined. What are the implications for transatlantic data flows? How can like-minded international partners work together to make Japan's vision of digital trust a reality? Japan's vision, guys. I was not making this stuff up. You can research it more for yourself. But we're going to play 15 minutes worth. We're going to end with this lady on the bottom left. Let's pay attention to this. I'm going to go ahead and rewind it. And if anything, we're going to play this right now.
Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Bill Etchickson, a senior fellow specializing in digital policy at the Center for European Policy Analysis. The saying goes that data is the new oil. And if that's so, then data only can achieve its full economic potential if it flows freely around the globe. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Authoritarian countries led by China and Russia are restricting data flows and building up giant digital walls. Democracies, unwittingly or wittingly, are also restricting data flows out of privacy concerns. We're here to discuss an important initiative led by the Japanese government to break down those data walls, at least among democracies. It's called Data Flows with Trust. At the upcoming G7 summit this week in Hiroshima, leaders will discuss how to manage the emergence of powerful new artificial intelligence systems as ChatGPT and how to confront China's tech ambition. Let me introduce the speakers. We have first Hideki Fujisawa, minister in the economic section of the Embassy of Japan to the United States. We have Jeffrey Geertz, director of international economics at the U.S. National Security Council. We have Karen Kornblue, managing director of digital innovation and democracy at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Rob Strayer, executive vice president, global policy information technology industry council. And finally, Theodore Christakis, a senior fellow and professor of international and European law at the University of Grenoble, Alps. Good. Mr. Fujisawa, let's start with you. Japan is the author of this proposal. The data free flow for trust has taken the main stage in the pre-talks, or one of the main stages in the pre-talks of this G7 summit. Could you briefly explain the proposal and speak about why your government made it?
Oh, thank you, Bill-san. So this is Fujisawa from the Embassy of Japan. So I'm an economic minister in the Embassy of Japan. First of all, it's a great honor for me to participate in the wonderful panel discussion today. Thank you very much for having me. So yes, as so this year, Japan holds the presidency of the G7 More than a year has passed since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But we can find a roadmap to end the brutal behavior. The invasion has affected the entire world in the various ways. So against this backdrop, G7 summit will be held this weekend, actually, with the leaders of the world leading economies governing in Hiroshima. In the very turbulent world, national security and economic issues are no longer discussed separately. So the G7, which discusses global affairs, is expected to discuss many topics related to the economy this year. Specifically, the G7 is expected to discuss economic security, such as how to make supply chain resilient and protect critical minerals, and how to secure energy supplies for countries around the world, including the global south. So digital policy, especially DFFT, so as Bill-san said, data free flow with trust, which is one of the important issues for new economic policy from the geographical perspective. Recently, digital technology has transformed society, the economy, and the people's lifestyles, creating various issues to be discussed at the G7. In addition to that, it has become extremely important to consider geopolitical aspects when discuss digital policy. So prior to the G7 summit this week, the G7 digital and tech ministers meeting was held at the end of April. A ministerial declaration was adopted, an outcome of the meeting. So for example, the promoting responsible AI and the global AI governance was the major theme. Policy making of AI is becoming important due to rapid technological progress and its diffusion in society, including a generative AI, which is very recently becoming a hot topic. Japan is willing to lead discussion among the G7 and the like-minded countries about this AI issue. And of course, internet governance was also included in the ministerial declaration. For example, G7 committed itself to the declaration for the future of the internet and pledged its commitment to cooperating for its implementation. So this kind of discussion was on the agenda, but one of the main deliverables of the G7 digital minister meeting was the endorsement of the launch of the institutional arrangement for partnership, IAP, on DFFT, which is the first international framework for data. The IAP is a framework for creating challenges in terms of data flow, in which governments and business work together to address data-related issues through the implementation of projects. Once again, I would like to briefly explain the background of the DFFT. At the present, there is no global agreement on digital rules, and major countries place different values on them. Especially digital protectionism by the authoritarian countries could be the opposite of the value of data free flow. On the other hand, even looking at Atlantic relations, which is actually what CPA is focusing on. There are some differences in views between the United States and Europe. And this situation is not changing. The digital world may be, fragmented, and the nation of authoritarian countries with technological power may govern the global digital economy.
Thanks.
With this in mind, so we have been advancing the concept of DFFT since Japan's presidency of the G20 Osaka in 2019. So we have been, encouraging the careful discussion in fora, in WTO and the APEC, in order to balance the need for the digital business environment for company, the consumer company.
Thanks. I think that's a good introduction.
Should I stop here?
Yeah,
okay.
Because we'd like to keep
Thank
it going. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Gertz, what's the position of the United States on data flows with trust, and how would this play into the European debate about adequacy and the privacy shield for transatlantic data flows?
Great. Thanks, Bill. And thanks to SIPA for organizing this event. Real pleasure to join you and the other panelists here today to talk about data free flow with trust. So, I'll start by saying that the free flow of data across borders is really critical. It's enabled countless benefits to societies and economies across the globe. Global communications, joint research, the ability for small startups to scale are all enabled by global free flows of data. And, it's really crucial to remember that this is not just important for large tech companies, but for companies large and small across all sectors of the economy. At the same time, we know that unfettered access to data in the wrong hands poses risk to both privacy and national security and can undermine democratic institutions. Can be used to spread misinformation, enable discrimination, and human rights abuses. So really, we believe the global community needs to work together to develop approaches to data governance that protect national security and human rights, while also enabling innovation and economic growth. So, since you mentioned the EU discussions, I can start there with a few brief comments. The EU-US data privacy framework is the culmination of a joint effort by the United States and the European Commission to restore stability to transatlantic data flows following the Schrems II decision. So under the data privacy framework, the United States has made unprecedented commitments of first, to strengthen privacy and civil liberties safeguards governing US signals intelligence. Second, to establish a new redress mechanism with independent and binding authority. And third, to enhance existing rigorous and layered oversight of signals intelligence activities. So we continue to work with the European Commission in finalizing the adequacy process, which will restore full legal certainty to transatlantic data flows, which underpin the $7 trillion transatlantic economy. To be clear, we believe this framework fully addresses the concerns outlined in the Schrems II judgment and are confident will provide a durable legal basis for transatlantic data flows. But we also know that restoring EU-US data flows, while necessary, is definitely not sufficient. These are global conversations. We need global interoperable norms and rules to ensure that protection of data is being adaptable to different systems of government. And so, that's one of the reasons why the United States is working with 8 other partners, including Japan, I'd note, to expand the global cross-border privacy rules system. That's one of our kind of high priorities in these spaces. It's an interoperable global framework for commercial data privacy. It's also why we as the United States worked with partners at the OECD to negotiate the OECD Declaration on Government Access to Personal Data held by private sector entities. This was published last December. The declaration articulates common approaches to safeguarding privacy, human rights, and freedoms when governments access personal data for national security and law enforcement purposes. I'm quite excited about that as well. And certainly the reason we're here to talk today is why we're also very grateful for Japan's longstanding leadership on data free flow of trust, and excited to join in the new initiative that the minister was just speaking about. So, secure and trusted global data flows require that like-minded governments work together, requires defining what trust means, requires sharing information about the checks and balances in their different legal systems, and identifying commonalities and minimum technical standards to ensure data is protected from those who do not play by the same rules. Governments need to work with industry, academia, and civil society to develop these shared understandings and trust across the ecosystem. And that's why we're very excited to be working with Japan and other G7 partners to make progress on this critical agenda. So maybe I'll stop there as introductory remarks and happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Ambassador Kornblum, we met when you were at the OECD, and the OECD is really leading on this issue. How can we operationalize, some of the nice words about principles, but what can make them concrete?
That's a great question. And I'm so enthusiastic about the work that Japan is leading and the US is collaborating on in the G7 and hopefully in the G20 as well. So I co-chair a global task force of experts on trusted data flows with Julie Brill, the former FTC commissioner and Deputy General Counsel of Microsoft. And we've been taking a look at these issues for the last year. And there are two trends that I think are happening at the same time that are really important to take note of as we're trying to address these issues through the G7. One is that, as was just said, as Jeff was just talking about, there's been this incredible momentum that's been created at the OECD. And what I hear is important about the OECD process is two things. One is just getting the intelligence communities to sit down with the privacy officials has been incredibly important. And then the second piece has been the agreement on principles, that we all follow these principles, and that this is what democratic nations and our allies commit to. So that's been incredibly important. Then there's also been this work on the US-EU framework, the Cloud Act, movement forward on law enforcement issues, and then the CBPR work on commercial data privacy. So a lot of momentum that it is incredibly important to leverage and take advantage of and lock in and build on. But on the other hand, there's been increasing nervousness on behalf of national governments and movements towards other kinds of adequacy of saying, we need to keep data local. And that I don't just mean in the US, but I mean the EU. In the US as well, we're concerned more and more about supply chains and about cybersecurity and having data localized. We see that here, we see that in the EU, we see that in other places. And these reflect real concerns. But I think what we need to do is combine the progress we've made with some more granular ways of addressing the concerns of countries. Because it's not always, as we know on this call, it's not always the solution to keep the data localized. If you have some real concerns about cybersecurity, about getting access to your data, and the classic example, of course, is Ukraine, that Ukraine put its data in the cloud, and that was more secure than keeping the data on servers in country. So what we're trying to do, and I'll just wrap this up real quick, what we're trying to do is figure out not what's the solution, but what are some building blocks that we can put in place, taking advantage of the progress that's been made to start giving assurance to countries with these concerns. And we think that the G7 process is just a wonderful opportunity, as they're saying, to institutionalize it and to think about what to do next to build on this progress.
All right, welcome back. So some bullish info, to say the least, right? We're going to give you a little bit more, and I'm going to give a shout out to Level 8. We have shared some of his content in the past. Let's go ahead and blow this up. So here it is, and I'm going to go ahead and get this translated, obviously, for you guys. He basically tweeted this out way earlier today, right? Which is, well, technically now it's midnight. I know I'm up kind of late doing this, but I'm excited about all this stuff, this opportunity. Anyway, he posted this, technically speaking, yesterday, 5:19 a.m., Pacific Standard Time. In the translation, and let's see if I can blow this up a tad bit more. All right. Yeah, there we go. He states, Japan will finally move forward. Think about this for a moment. Go forward. Innovate with blockchain. It's funny how we always mention, innovation. And it's ridiculous even yet that Jasmy's in innovation is on. June 8th, 2020, Council for Science, Technology and Innovation, a day in the life of the Prime Minister's office homepage, right? So, let's jump into this. So we're going to play a little, or not play, but we're going to share some of this. And I've taken you to there. He said June 8th, 2020, it's 2023. So that was just kind of like a typo. This comes from the Prime Minister's Office of Japan. Council for Science, Technology, and Innovation. I'm going to get into some of the key things here. So, Prime Minister Kishida held the 69th conference on science, technology, and innovation at Prime Minister's office, right? This is real recent. This is why I'm giving you guys this update. At the meeting, a discussion was held on the matters such as the formulation of the Integrated Innovation Strategy for 2023. Based on today's discussion, the Prime Minister said, quote, look at what's mentioned here, Today we had a discussion on policies that should be prioritized in relation to science, technology, and innovation. The first is the strategic promotion of advanced science and technology. Generative AI, artificial intelligence, and quantum technology are rapidly advancing, and international competition for advanced technology development and human resource investment is intensifying. In the field of fusion energy as well, competition has begun for early commercialization and industrialization. Second, they will strengthen the foundation of knowledge and human resource development. They will look, or I should say they will work to strengthen research capabilities by promoting university funds and regional core unique research universities, as well as young people and women. You know, at the beginning of the video, you saw the intro in regards to Society 5.0. Think about it for a moment. And also think about what Jasmy is looking to do with their connections to what they want to accomplish with smart cities. At the end of the day, this is why we pay attention to so many of these partnerships and what the partnerships are looking to accomplish. For me, it all makes sense for the bigger picture. Now, we know that when it comes to Jasmy, they have outlined in regards to the roadmap of their AI tech engine. Just hear me out on this for a second. So, in this, it mentions, with regard to AI, under the Hiroshima AI process established by the G7 chairman, they will deepen international discussions on trustworthy AI, deals with risk, and promote its use, and they will work to strengthen their development of capabilities focusing on the development and expansion of computational resources and data. Third, I know it seems like I'm reading a lot of this, they create innovation ecosystem. Innovation ecosystem? That sounds interesting. And you know, it's like, again, you think about where Jasmy is in an innovation zone. Hear me out. Diverse human resources will make the most of their potential to create new industries and society. Again, a perfect example is why we covered the whole thing of, you know, Society 5.0. Shout out to Brian, who originally introduced some of this stuff to us. So we will create an environment that will lead the change. Global Startup Campus Initiative, which was launched, listen to this, in earnest at the Japan-US Summit meeting. Ooh. Now, some people are like, you know, US is never going to be on board, Max. I understand that. But the bigger problem is not the US. It may very well, as we know, be just that, the SEC. So what's going to happen with that? I don't know. But it's definitely worth paying attention to. So it states they learn the methods of top of like overseas universities such as MIT, in addition to cultivating startups that can be used in the industry. They encourage the development of startup human resources nationwide. In addition, as a foundation for these initiatives, they work to strengthen collaboration between research institutions centered on national research and developing agencies. Now, the key thing is getting together with different countries with the research to make this all happen, whether it is with AI, whether it is, you know, through data free flow with trust and so on, right? But as we get further into this, Mr. Level 8 brought some more information to us. It's worth paying attention to. So I want to show you guys this. And, you know, he states right here, the concept is a project. All right, this comes from the Minister's Office of Japan. The concept is a project that will become the next big thing. They will learn methods of top overseas universities such as MIT, right, to work on world-class startups and promote development of, you know, some of these things that we outlined earlier. But as I get to the second page, look at this. On June 8, 2023, Prime Minister Kishida held the 69th Conference on Science, Technology, and Innovation at the minister's official residence. He was so impressed with all this, he held it at his official residence. Can you imagine if some of our elected officials, whether it was Elizabeth Warren or, say, Joe Biden, some of these guys, were so impressed with blockchain technology, distributed ledger technologies, that they decided to, you know, host it at their own official residence? See the difference between Japan and the United States? Right? When it comes to, like I said before, Japan is leading the charge. They're literally leading it big time. You have the prime minister of their country, for crying out loud, so impressed with all this that he hosted it at his own residence. I don't know. I thought that was pretty cool. But it says, at the meeting, a discussion was held on the matters such as the formulation of the Integrated Innovation Strategy 2023. Based on today's discussion, the Prime Minister said, quote, listen to this. Today we had a discussion on policies that should be prioritized in relation to science, technology, and innovation to go. He's the head guy of the country. The first is the strategic promotion of advanced science and technology. Technologies such as generative AI, and quantum technology are rapidly advancing, and international competition for cutting-edge technology development and human resource investment is intensifying. If it's intensifying so much, when we look at, for instance, the price of Jasmy, and why people who just simply haven't done their own research, are going to flood this because, it's a scam, and it's tanking, and so on. They don't understand the bigger picture. I don't even think they have even realized at scale of like what Kunitake Ando was able to do as when he was president of Sony many years ago, right? Where he shared the stage for instance, with Steve Jobs of Apple and whatnot. I'm looking at Jasmy as being one of the most impressive, if not maybe one of the most impressive ones to accumulate during this accumulation phase. And just because it becomes that much more, I guess you could say, distressed on its price, to me, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it's a blessing in disguise, not financial advice. It says the field of fusion energy, which, he saw a demonstration, showed him that the competition has begun for early commercialization and industrialization. In Japan as well, the Moonshot Research and Development System, etc., has been used as a stimulus for research and development into original, gets cut off right there, but it says accelerate investment and quickly lead to social implementation. Social implementation? A little bit more. They're going to accelerate investment and lead to social implementation as soon as possible. As soon as possible. So here's the thing, all right? And I know this is quite, I don't know, some people say, man, you're not doing a deep dive, you're doing a lecture. Call it whatever you want. I'm a school teacher. It's in my DNA. My thing is this, all right? I bring this to you guys to understand the bigger, broader picture of things. Some people are going to criticize this video and say, it's not just 100% Jasmy related. Are you kidding me? You as a Jasmy investor should know a little bit more about what these things are and why it's so important to pay attention to DFFT because of what is outlined here. And that basically is, like it says, this is going to strengthen their knowledge base and human resource development. They will work to strengthen their research capabilities, strengthen the development of diverse human resources, including young people, women, with the 2 pillars of university funds and the promotion of regional core distinct research. But with AI, under the Hiroshima AI process established by the G7, they will deepen international discussions, computational resource data while addressing risks. They will focus on strengthening their development capabilities. Third is the formation of innovation ecosystem. Think about this for a second. So before we jump more into this, some people might say, well, I thought this video is just, about DFFT, well, there's more to it. The reason why there's more to it is understanding Web3. If you understand the concept of Web3, you understand that AI is a big, if not one of the biggest proponents of just that, Web3. Third is the formation of innovative ecosystem. I mentioned that. Diverse human resources will make use of their individual potentials to create an environment that will lead to the creation of new industries and social change. What is one of these new industries? And what is one of these new things for social change? You better believe, especially when it comes to Japan, some of these smart cities. We may never see that in the United States because we're just a totally different culture. But that culture over there in Japan, that's part of their social change. That's part of their new industry. The Global Startup Campus Initiative, which was launched in earnest at the Japan-US Summit meeting, is the flagship project. They will learn the methods of top overseas universities, like I mentioned earlier, such as MIT, and work to develop world-class startups and promote the development of startup human resources nationwide. In addition, as a basis of these 3 initiatives, let me jump to the next one. This concept will be a project that will become the next big thing. The next big thing, oh, is this why Max is putting so much emphasis on this? Yes, one of many reasons. This will, you know, like I said, you're going to learn some of this information, but regarding the Integrated Innovation Strategy of 2023, they discussed today, well, a few days ago, that they will promptly make a cabinet decision. Think about this. They're promptly going to make a cabinet decision. I thought Taro Kono was saying that, you know, you're going to start off small and see where this thing's going. Doesn't seem like this is small anymore, does it? No, it doesn't at all. So, working promptly to make a cabinet decision, being presented all this information at his own home residence, the Prime Minister of freaking Japan, for crying out loud, right? Very bullish. Under Minister Takachi, if I pronounce that right, he asked the relevant ministries and agencies to work together to implement bold policies with a sense of urgency. Urgency. I'm telling you flat out, you guys. It doesn't matter if you hold Jasmy, XRP, XLM, Quant, all this stuff, or H-bar, you name it. The point is understanding that Japan is leading the forefront. And in regards to the Jasmy connection, you understand the connection now. The connection means that, wow, maybe this Max guy who does these long lectures or deep dives, maybe the reason why he does it is because, guess what? Maybe that guy might be right about something. That is, we could very well get to the promised land first with the likes of Jasmy. That's why I'm so excited about Jasmy. Why do I want to get excited about Jasmy and accumulate it when it's like at 25 cents per coin? No. I'm recognizing the opportunities right now. I've seen some of you guys, for instance, you know, I'm not going to mention his name, but he knows who he is. He's a great guy. But, you know, he was talking about, like, Max, I'm literally eating ramen every day for the next few months because I need to, that's extra money for I can buy, you know, Jasmy and so on. Think about that. Why would people put themselves through that type of hell? Want to know why? Because they see the writing that's on the wall. They see the pathway forward. They understand why this is such a big deal. Because that regulatory framework, we already had the foundation laid. That foundation, it was a blueprint, for crying out loud, back in 2019. And that blueprint was at the World Economic Forum. I'm a big fan of WTF, Mr. Klaus Schwab and all that. I understand that. But the key thing was, you know, we saw the former Prime Minister introduce that concept. And now it's coming to fruition. And it went from, you know, Shinzo Abe, God rest his soul, to passing it to the torch to the next guy, who was Taro Kono, who we recently saw, did we not? Have we not been watching some of my deep dives, right? Understanding that Taro Kono received the torch, then he passed it on, and now the ball is really, really starting to roll here. You know? Bold policies equal that regulatory framework with a sense of urgency. Look what's going on with the SEC. That should make you pay attention, because it's like, if there's a sense of urgency with going on with this, because that's going to bring in that institutional money is a threat to the old system. Is it not? Yes, it is. Let's jump into the next part of what we have. And that basically, I think actually is it. Yes, it is it. So I have another deep dive I'm going to get into. And the reason why I want you guys to pay attention to it, because it's going to be in regards to Hyperledger Fabric. Now, in the past, we talked about Hyperledger Fabric. And, you know, yeah, Quant, you basically has interoperability with it, but Jasmy uses Hyperledger Fabric. And I'm going to get into the deep dive on why Jasmy uses Hyperledger Fabric. There's some specific reasons, and yes, you better believe it has to do with data free flow with trust. So if you want more Jasmy content, make sure you check out the next deep dive. And we're going to get into that in a bit. It'll be released tomorrow. I'm trying to keep up with the flow of what we present to you guys. Really glad to be able to cover some of these things. If you understand the bigger picture when it comes to Jasmy, then you already know, as the saying goes. Some people say, you know, if you're in the know, you're in the know. Some people don't know. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's not financial advice. Just like for the same reason, back in the day when people got into Bitcoin at $5, and basically diamond-handed the living heck out of that to maybe over 10,000 or higher. They knew. Why? Because there was an actual Bitcoin white paper. They understand Satoshi Nakamoto's bigger picture through decentralization. But we're in a different era right now. And the era basically is this: the decentralization of data. What is that worth? I think it's worth quite a bit. I'm glad to hold Jasmy. I think a lot of you guys are glad as well. Smash that like. Subscribe if you haven't. Check out our live show. I know that recently we've had some issues with our live shows, but nonetheless, we would love to see you part of our live show. If you have any questions or comments and so on. Won't keep you any more further. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Over and out.